Well, as many of you already know, hundreds of thousands of tourists will be making their way to Plymouth, Massachusetts this year to take part in the American Thanksgiving experience firsthand. Now, first-timers will discover gorgeous coastlines, historic landmarks on every block, and undoubtedly the feeling that you just stepped into a Norman Rockwell painting. What's even more amazing is that even if you're about to make your 25th visit to the area, each time will be different than the last. Well, some would say change isn't so good, but we would all agree it's inevitable and something we should celebrate. Now, here's a guy who celebrated by documenting all of the progress in this town in his wildly popular book, Plymouth, Then and Now.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dan Rapoza, born and raised in Plymouth, Massachusetts, local photographer and author.
Well, unbeknownst to him, his book became somewhat of a walking guidebook for tourists coming to the area who wanted to explore Plymouth through the eyes of a time machine. We were super interested in finding out just how this was all put together. So we asked him to take us on a walking tour himself and give us the experience of what it was like to build this book from the ground up.
You know, I found a lot of these old, photographs literally within 5 minutes of walking from this very spot. It's never really meant to be a book. It was just a really cool project I came up with walking around town, looking at old pictures from the 1800s, 1900s, and started matching them up, taking pictures and lining them up in Photoshop and kind of put it out there on social media, and the response was pretty big and people wanted to see more. I wanted a good 100-page book, 100 locations, and 95% of them are right here in the heart of downtown Plymouth.
What's the hardest one? Do you remember the hardest one that was just almost, you weren't sure exactly where to be, where to stand?
Well, the ones in the book were easy. The ones that didn't make the book were hard. One of the trickiest ones was Jordan Hospital, because the old hospital, the vantage points, of those photos that I found were taken from where the new hospital is now. So there was a lot of locations that I couldn't physically get my body at,
Gotcha.
and if I couldn't line it up 100% accurate, it didn't make the cut. It didn't make the book.
Location.
All right, well, this is one of them right here.
Okay.
We are right here. That's the rail. Actually, it's actually looking this way. There's always some kind of landmark or point of reference that I was able to line up. Like right here, we're on the corner of Summer Street and Market Street. Obviously you have these, the post office, which used to be a church. And obviously the Church of the Pilgrimage over here. And, I found a lot of these old, photographs literally within 5 minutes of walking from this very spot. You turn the corner, and then you're on, Main Street, then you're on Water Street, Lyden Street right around the corner, and that's where it pretty much all began. It started with just a few from the old calendars that, we used to get in the mail. I got more and more interested, and I got my hands on more and more photos, and they were all pretty easy. I mean, being born and raised in this town, there was very little research to do. Because that's our view right there of the church.
Oh, okay. Perfect.
I knew exactly where almost 90% of these locations were. So it's very, very easy. You just wait for a nice spring day and you head out with the camera and line things up. A little bit of post-production in Photoshop, and our book was born. And this actually, back in the day, even the 60s or whatever, it used to be, I believe, Cohen's. Which was a restaurant, ice cream place. My dad used to, work down here. Well, not work, but he would come down here for ice cream. And you'd never know it now. You're looking at it and it's, it's Town Brook. You kind of think it's untouched territory, kind of preserved. But, that's the most surprising, part of this book is, as a little kid, you walk through these areas and you look at Town Brook and you walk through Jenny Gristmill, you think that's the way everything has been and always has been. But when you start doing a little bit of research and looking at these photos, you're like, wow, there were mills here, there were stores here, things have been torn down, rebuilt, and pretty cool to see all that underway. You know, back in the day, you talked about, 1908. Some of these pictures are a little later, but for the most part, it's 1800s. The Samoset House was a beautiful hotel, and now it's the site of, the now closed Papagino's on Samoset Street. You know, all these places you drive by every day, you take them for granted, but you're going about your daily business, and when you kind of take a step back and stand exactly where this photographer was in 1880 or whatever, you're not starstruck, but it's kind of cool to be like, wow, this is where the guy was, and look at how different everything was, as opposed to, hey, I drive by here a million times a day.
What was the most interesting thing you learned when putting this book together?
Just how much of this town has been bulldozed down and rebuilt. You know, as a little kid, I thought that everything, including Town Brook and Brewster Gardens and Burial Hill and Coles Hill, was untouched. But it's gone through many phases. Houses have been built, torn down, things have been reshaped, reconfigured. That was the big thing. Seeing how the way the town used to be, how many changes it's gone through.
Has it been a positive thing in your mind? Like progress that happens anyway, regardless, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some aspects, I think the town was, better looking a little bit back then, untouched. But obviously, there's been, upgrades and progress. And
I think we were all better looking younger.
Nice.